Hey guys, this is Max Steinberg at SaberSim. I'm here with my brother Danny Steinberg, who's a partner at SaberSim and also a daily fantasy professional. And we're coming at you with a video that's all about making adjustments for NFL. So most professionals, including Danny and I, usually use a projection system as a baseline for when we're making NFL lineups. But given there's so much time during the week to do research, look at data, look at your own data, look at other smart people, what they think. I think it's really important for NFL to actually make adjustments to the SaberSim baseline projections, making sure that SaberSim isn't undervaluing a player that you don't want to overlook or overvaluing a player that you actually don't like as much. And making these adjustments can really help you get even more of an edge in NFL. So I just wanted to give it to you, Danny, and talk about how do you start with making the adjustments to SaberSim's projections, and what you look at, and just what is the first thing that you would do?
Yeah, so I love using our team-based projection dials that we have. You can compare to how we are projecting a game to go to Vegas Insider, or using our sports betting tool, and see, okay, is SaberSim missing something here? Is maybe Vegas more sharp, or do you have some genuine insight on how a team is going to do, or how good a defense is, or how good an offense is?
Yeah, I think the one that stands out, I'm kind of laughing because the spread is so absurd, is the New York Jets, who Vegas actually projects them at about 10 points. We have them at 15. Obviously, Vegas is projecting them really low. I was talking about this with you earlier. I'm not sure if this is just completely absurd, or maybe the Patriots defense is not that good. But what would you do with the Jets here, seeing this sort of massive discrepancy here?
Yeah, so I think maybe, I'm a Patriots fan, so I think maybe it is absurd, so I'd maybe keep it. But a more reasonable thing to do may be to lower them closer. There's a huge discrepancy here, and we may want to assume that Vegas kind of knows better here.
Right. So the Jets, I think, we're at 4.8. I'm going to lower them 2 points and getting closer to Vegas. We're going to say yes to that adjustment. And what you should see is that we're going to see Le'Veon Bell's projection is going to be a little lower. And it's going to be proportionally lower given them scoring 12 points instead of 14 points. And this is a nice way to just adjust things on a team level. And usually I personally like to tinker with this a lot and just get the team projections exactly how I think, like I sort of handicap the games. I think that's a fun way to start with making your adjustments. I'm curious what other data sources that you use, Danny. And I'm not that curious because I know, but I'm just going to lead you in to this text.
AirYards.com is a good one that gives you a lot of information on more granular statistical things going on in the game, like how many air yards a receiver has, what their weighted opportunity was. Those are really good stats that I like comparing to the projections and saying, okay, like, for example, Keenan Allen, he leads the league, or let's see, Keenan Allen and DeAndre Hopkins lead the league in target share. So are they the two receivers that SaberSim are projecting highest? And if they're not, is SaberSim maybe getting it wrong in some way?
Yeah, and so that's sort of interesting to look at because we can actually sort of compare the two this week, right? And you can see that Keenan Allen, and by the way, SaberSim actually, I think this is an important thing to talk about, which is SaberSim actually has more detailed projections than we're actually showing right now. So these are the just general projections, and it basically just shows fantasy points. But if you look at the detailed projections, it'll actually show you what the breakdown is between what the fantasy point projection is and what are the components of that projection. So Danny just mentioned Keenan Allen's DeAndre Hopkins. We have them at a similar target share. Their weighted opportunity rating, which is a great stat, is very, very good for both of them. And the strength of passing offense is similar. So it's interesting to look at these two players and say, okay, there's a pretty large discrepancy between their projection. And, one thing that you might do is you'd say, okay, well, maybe Keenan Allen is too high. I'm going to maybe lower this projection a little bit. and maybe raise DeAndre Hopkins a bit and make them more similar. It's one thing that you could just sort of look at with that.
Yes.
And, you can just look at the site in general and see what you can get from it. I mean, I look at the site a lot, especially after the games, just looking at what this weighted opportunity rating number is and using it as sort of a way to just be higher on someone than normal or use it as a ranking system. And I think it's a valuable way to just start with looking at receivers and how to adjust them as well. I think also, one thing you can do at an individual level is just look at the strength of the passing offense in general. And I think there's a lot of ways to look at that. And one way I personally look at it, so Danny and I are computer programmers, so we actually will make some tools with the play-by-play data that are helpful for us in adjusting. And one tool that I've created, and I'm not the only one who's created this, by the way, I'm sure you'll see people tweet out things that are similar to this, but I used a machine learning model to essentially gauge what the expectation every game a team was supposed to pass, given like the distance from the end zone, how much they're up and down in distance, so on and so forth. And I use it to look at how run heavy or pass heavy team is. So you might find something else like this online, or you might have your own tool, or you might find someone smarter as the tool. But I like looking at this or looking at just strength of passing offense. So as you can see here, Minnesota, which you've probably heard a lot about, is running the ball a lot. Like Mike Zimmer is just a team established to run. And one team you might not have heard about is the Indianapolis Colts. And so maybe via a tool like this that you've seen or created or something else, you think, okay, Indianapolis is just a really, really strong rushing offense. They're going to run the ball a lot. So then you could do something like say, okay, well, if Indianapolis is supposed to run the ball a lot, then I would think Marlon Mack should be pretty high up here in rush yards. And in fact, he actually is. We have him as the fourth highest player in rush yards. So it seems like we're actually quantifying this pretty well. And I think that's the importance of actually looking at the details of projection. But that being said, I do like this rushing offensive lot. I might make a smaller adjustment because the details of the actual projection do actually fit my preconceived notion here. Do you have anything to add there, Danny?
Yeah, don't sell yourself short. I think this tool is really cool. I think obviously the more a team rushes, the more we should expect the running backs to do well. And I think a bigger factor is the more team passes it, the better the QB and the receivers are going to do. I mean, especially in point per reception scoring like DraftKings, how much a team throws the ball means a lot to how many receptions these players are going to have. So someone like Kansas City, who, they actually are not one of the pass heaviest teams in the NFL, but they've been in situations, according to your model, that have been not likely scenarios to pass, and they're passing. So I would definitely be really high on, guys like Sammy Watkins and perhaps Kelce, and maybe even a little higher on Mahomes, depending on how we have them.
Yeah, so Sammy Watkins, we have, a little bit down here in those receiving yards. So he's someone that I want to boost. And then obviously Patrick Mahomes is the GOAT. We have a lot of passing yards, however, this is such an extreme thing. Maybe we go more. Maybe we give him a 27 projection. So I think that you're right in that. You can look at these types of things and make it and just be high on a specific passing offense and say, okay, I'm going to give some boost to some of the players in this passing offense.
Yeah, it can be easy to get really into an individual player, but I often regret not just being high on an entire offense in general and not being so attached to any given player.
Yeah, I think that's true. And so I think with that being said, not just boosting Sammy Watkins, but boosting someone like Demarcus Robinson and maybe Mecole Hardman as well is going to be probably a smarter move here instead of just being high on one of the players. So I think that's a really good point. I think another thing, and this is the last sort of data source that we're going to talk about, but I think there's really, there's so much information out there. I think, you're probably aware of more data sources than we are, but these are some important ones we look at. And I think just listening to podcasts, sometimes you might listen to a podcast and be like, oh, this guy really trusts like Deshaun Watson. Let's just boost Deshaun Watson. I mean, it doesn't have to be some very advanced tool. It can be very simple. You could watch the games. It's things like that.
Yes.
But the last thing I want to talk about is sort of red zone stuff. So this is another free tool that gives you some really detailed numbers on red zone stuff. And I think red zone is an important thing to look at when you're adjusting, because those red zone opportunities have a really high expectation of turning into touchdowns, and especially for running backs, that's really important. And one thing that stood out for me here is if you look at inside the 5 rushes and you look at red zone rushes in general, we'll see Malcolm Brown has quite a bit. He actually is second in the league in inside the 5 rushes. And that really does not bode well for someone like Todd Gurley, who we have as, one of the highest players in expected rushing touchdowns this week. And that probably is not correct given, we take a long view of things, right? Todd Gurley's touchdown expectation last year was really, really high. He was just the workhorse back, and we expected him to be in all those red zone situations. But given his health that you've probably been reading about, and given these numbers, this touchdown expectation is probably a little too high, or maybe a lot too high. So he's someone that I'm gonna see these red zone numbers and look at his touchdowns and say, oh, wait a second, this seems way, way too high, and maybe lower his projection quite a bit like that. So just a few ways that you can use some of these data sources to adjust projections in general. And I think these detailed projections are very helpful. One more thing
that could, I think the last thing I'd want to mention is just the news couldn't be some of the lowest hanging fruit. Like, SaberSim doesn't know that OJ Howard's in the doghouse, or someone has some sort of nagging injury or something. So really being up on the news and figuring out, what are the coaches saying? What are the beat writers saying? Is there something I can glean from this that SaberSim is not taking into consideration? I think that can be really important.
Yeah, I think that's too. I mean, I'm always checking on RotoWorld. I'm really up on Twitter, and I think, yeah, you really can, especially when there's injury situations where it's unclear, is watching a press conference even, or looking at some of these news sources can be really, really helpful for making some adjustments that you actually just could not possibly capture by just using a data-driven approach. So I think that's a really, really great point. So I think another thing, and I'll just say this as the last word, is I think it's nice to compare things on a team level as well, and just sort of use some of these detailed things. Just look at how the team is shaping up as a whole and how that might differ from what your opinion is. And I think Washington's actually a perfect team to look at, because if you look at the wide receivers for Washington, you're going to see Trey Quinn, Terry McLaurin, and Paul Richardson. And Trey Quinn and McLaurin specifically are pretty close. But if you look at some of the air yards data from this year that, as we said, we really like to look at, if you look at the weighted opportunity rating, you see that McLaurin is really, really having an exceptional opportunity this year. He has a lot of targets down the field. This opportunity is a lot. And this projection clearly, I mean, again, Trey Quinn, if it's hard to project rookies, so it's going to just sort of be hard to adjust this quick enough using a very mathematical approach. But you don't have to use a very mathematical approach. You're using the mathematical approach plus you're an adjustment. So you can sort of differentiate these players a little more than we do in a way that's smart. And now you're probably not going to overlook someone like Terry McLaurin, who has a lot of stats in his favor that would make you want to get him in daily fantasy. So that's just a general sense of how we make adjustments in general. Again, the data sources you get, the podcasts you listen to, the news, there's all these ways to look at for places to get an edge adjusting. And say, and also we didn't even mention ownership projections that you can use your own discretion to adjust those as well. Obviously, I don't think Terry McLaurin is going to get 2% ownership. It might be higher. You can adjust these as well. So you can use a lot of different sources, as many sources as you can possibly find, to make these adjustments. You can compare on a team. You can use these detailed player projections to see how things differ on a detailed level, and you can just make a lot of adjustments. And really, you could actually, so you sort of can take over this baseline of projecting and really make a nuanced, basically, projection system that takes in every single thing into account. So hope you enjoyed this video. And as always, if you have any questions, you can tweet me. I'm at Max J. Steinberg. Danny is at Daniel Singer S. You can find us on the SaberSim Slack channel. And as well, I just want to point out that we still are offering this 3-day free trial. So you can try out SaberSim this weekend, basically for the whole weekend for free. You really have nothing to lose. We have many other videos talking about our lineup builder, which I really think is the very best in the business. So I suggest you check those out as well. So it's, big tournaments and daily fantasy as always. And we wish you the best of luck in them this weekend and the coming weekends and your fantasy football year.